Hey, it's Amy. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I'm worth something to my family. They called me a disappointment, and then this happened. My mom told me this place was too fancy for me, but when I walked in, the staff greeted me as the owner. That was the moment everything changed. The moment they realized I wasn't who they thought I was. Hook 2. All my life, they've tried to keep me down. My mom, my sister, even my own father. But now they're the ones left scrambling. From being called too fancy for this place to owning it, how did I get here? You won't believe what they did to try and stop me. And what I found out about them in the end? I stood outside the Grand Azure, my family's hotel. The evening air was cool, and the sprawling marble building towered above me, all sparkling lights and polished elegance. I could feel my heart thumping in my chest. It wasn't just the excitement that made my pulse race, it was the anxiety, too. I had fought for this moment, built it from nothing. But as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I didn't belong here. Not yet, at least. I had come a long way since the days when my family had dismissed my dreams. I used to be close to them, but that had all changed. My career choices, my refusal to follow in their footsteps, had distanced me from them. Now, here I was, a successful entrepreneur, secretly the owner of this luxury hotel chain. The Grand Azure wasn't just any hotel. It was the pinnacle of everything I had built, and my family had no idea. They thought I was just running some small, unimportant business on the side. I drew a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside me, proud but haunted by that nagging fear of judgment from them. I wasn't ready for this confrontation, but I had no choice. I had come too far to turn back now. My goal was simple: to prove to myself and to them that I had made it, all on my own, without their help. I started to walk toward the entrance, my heels clicking sharply on the stone walkway, but before I could reach the door, I saw her. Rose, my older sister, standing there like a stone wall, blocking the way. She stood tall and composed, her sharp eyes narrowing as she took in my appearance. I could see the smug smile forming on her face. Rose had always been the perfect child in our family, the one who had it all together, a successful lawyer, married with children. In her eyes, I was nothing more than a failure, someone who would never measure up. She had always made me feel small. "You're not serious, are you?" Rose scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "This place, it's too fancy for you, Amy." I stopped in my tracks, a cold wave of humiliation washing over me. Her words stung, but I kept my face neutral. I wasn't going to let her see how much it hurt. Instead, I squared my shoulders and lifted my chin, refusing to back down. "I'm here for the family event," I said calmly, though my voice betrayed a flicker of frustration. "Why don't you move out of the way?" She didn't budge, still looking at me like I was an inconvenience. Her eyes flicked to the door behind her, then back to me. "You're really going to embarrass yourself, Amy. You don't belong in this world." Her words dug deep. They weren't just about the hotel or the event. This was about everything. She had always underestimated me, and I was sick of it. But I didn't react. I kept my eyes locked on hers, silently reminding myself why I was here. This wasn't just about getting inside the hotel. It was about showing them I was someone they could no longer ignore, that I wasn't the person they thought I was. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small key card, holding it up for her to see. The key to my own hotel. It was more than just a piece of plastic. It was my symbol of success, the very thing Rose had never thought I could achieve. Without a word, I held it out in front of her. Her eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw a crack in her confident facade. But she quickly recovered, her smirk returning. "You think that's going to change anything?" she sneered. "That's not enough to earn a spot here, Amy. Not in my world." For a moment, I felt a wave of anger and shame, but I pushed it down. I wasn't going to let her ruin this moment. Not now, not ever again. I stepped past her and inserted the key into the door's lock. It clicked open and I walked inside, ignoring her as she stood there, fuming. The lobby was even more impressive than I remembered. Glowing chandeliers, marble floors, the scent of fresh roses filling the air. But I didn't feel the satisfaction I had imagined. Not yet. As I stepped deeper into the hotel, I heard footsteps behind me. Rose's voice, sharp and bitter, cut through the silence. "You still don't belong here, Amy. You never will." I didn't turn around. Instead, I looked ahead, my hand clutching the keycard. It was more than just a symbol of my ownership of the Grand Azure. It was a reminder of everything I had fought for. I walked into the lobby, where the staff greeted me warmly. Their recognition stung in a different way, because it wasn't just polite. They saw me for who I truly was, the owner. My family had no idea that I was the one who had made this place what it was. I knew that moment had shaken them. I could feel their eyes on my back, the weight of their judgment. They had no idea what I was capable of, and that was about to change. But I wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. I wasn't here to prove myself to them. I was here to take what had always been mine, to finally show them that they had never truly seen me. I walked toward the VIP section, where the family dinner was already in full swing. My heart pounded, but I was ready. As I stepped through the entrance, I heard Rose's voice again, but this time it wasn't a mocking tone. It was something else, something that made my stomach churn. "You don't belong here." Her words rang in my ears, but as I walked deeper into my own hotel, I realized something she didn't. I owned this place, and now it was my turn to take back what I'd always been denied. I sat down at the long, polished table in the VIP section of the Grand Azure, my back straight, my eyes fixed ahead. My family had quietly followed me in, and now we were all in the same room, but the distance between us felt wider than ever. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The shock of my entrance still lingered in the air like a storm cloud, and I could practically feel their eyes on me, full of disbelief. My mother was frozen, her mouth slightly agape, while Rose stood beside her, arms crossed, wearing a look of pure astonishment. They didn't say anything at first. They just watched, as if they were waiting for me to make a move, waiting for me to break. But I wasn't going to. Not today. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me uncomfortable. I kept my eyes focused on the table in front of me, feeling the cool surface beneath my fingertips. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't here to flaunt anything, to boast about what I had built. No, this was about showing them who I was, without saying a word. I wasn't going to beg for their approval, not anymore. The years of proving myself had led to this, quiet defiance. I could feel their judgment, heavy and suffocating, but I refused to let it touch me. It was as if the weight of their expectations, the years of ridicule and dismissal, was a barrier that I no longer had to carry. I had put in the work. I had fought for this. And now, standing in the very place they had never believed I could reach, I wasn't about to apologize. The silence stretched on, broken only by the soft murmurs of other guests nearby. But even that didn't matter. The real battle was here, at this table, with the people who had always seen me as nothing more than an underdog, a failure. The quiet felt like victory, the absence of their voices telling me I wasn't enough. I didn't need them to speak. I could hear everything in their silence. Rose, unable to hold her composure any longer, was the first to speak, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I see you've managed to slip in unnoticed. Should have known you'd make an entrance like this." I didn't flinch. I didn't even look at her, just let her words float by. Instead, I reached for the glass in front of me, took a slow sip, and continued to stare ahead. She wanted a reaction. She was hoping I'd crumble, but I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. "Amy," my mother's voice came next, sharp and low. "This isn't your place, Amy. You don't belong here. What do you think you're doing?" I could feel the weight of her words, but I let them roll off me. They didn't carry the sting they once did. I wasn't that person anymore, the one who needed their approval. I took a deep breath and, without turning to face her, said, "I'm here to stay, Mom, whether you like it or not. This is my place now." Silence followed. It wasn't the quiet of a room full of people unsure of what to say. It was the silence of disbelief. My mother, who had always told me I wasn't good enough for this kind of life, was speechless. I could feel the shift in the air. They were seeing me, finally seeing me for who I really was. The staff came over, polite as always, but there was a difference this time. When they greeted me, they didn't call me Miss or Ma'am. No, this time they called me Miss Amy. Their tone was different, respectful, acknowledging me for who I truly was, the owner. It wasn't just the usual greeting, it was recognition, and it stood in sharp contrast to the stunned faces of my family. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. The staff, who had seen me build this place from the ground up, knew me for what I had accomplished, and that was enough. I smiled faintly as they went on their way, leaving my family to stew in their own confusion. I couldn't help but think back to the days when they'd called me a failure, when they'd laughed at my dreams. Now, here I was, sitting at the head of a table they never thought I would belong at, with a business they never believed I could build. I had been underestimated for so long. But this was the moment everything changed. Rose, still standing beside my mother, cleared her throat as if trying to regain control of the situation. You know, you're embarrassing the family. You can't just waltz in here like you own the place. I glanced at her, my voice calm, even as I felt the fire of her words trying to chip away at my composure. It's not about being flashy, Rose. It's about knowing where I belong. And right now, I'm exactly where I should be. Her eyes narrowed, the weight of my words sinking in. She opened her mouth to retort, but my mother spoke first, her voice shaking with disbelief. You're still our daughter, Amy. But this isn't who you were meant to be. I could feel the bitterness in her tone, the old wounds she hadn't let go of. It hurt, yes, but not the way it used to. Not anymore. I didn't engage. Instead, I leaned back in my chair and let the silence settle around us. The longer they stayed quiet, the stronger I felt. My presence was undeniable now, and I didn't need to say anything else. My actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. As the dinner continued, I watched as the guests around the table began to talk to me more than they had before. They asked about my business, about the hotel, about the things I had built, and with each question, I could see my family growing smaller, shrinking in on themselves. They had nothing to say. The more I spoke about my achievements, the more I realized that they were starting to feel like outsiders in their own family dinner. And that felt good. Better than I could have imagined. But deep down, there was a quiet sadness, too. I knew this wasn't going to heal the years of judgment they had cast upon me. It wouldn't fix everything, but it was a step. And that was enough. As the night wore on, I leaned back in my chair, feeling the weight of the evening settle in. I wasn't going to fight anymore. I wasn't going to prove anything to anyone. I had already won. As the laughter continued around me, I couldn't shake the thought. They may never see me for who I truly am. But I don't need them to anymore. I've already won. I sat in the private dining room of the Grand Azure, my thoughts swirling in the aftermath of the family dinner. The taste of victory was still fresh, but the emptiness lingered, gnawing at the edges of my mind. I had walked into the hotel that night, a quiet defiance simmering inside me, and the reality of what I had accomplished hit me all at once. I had always wanted my family's respect, but now, sitting here alone, I realized something. I didn't need it anymore. But still, the question lingered. Should I confront them now, demand the respect I deserved, or should I wait? I thought about all the years of dismissal, the moments they made me feel small, like I didn't matter. I had built this place, this empire, and they still saw me as the disappointment. My mother's cold smile, Rose's mocking tone, it all came rushing back. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all. Should I speak up? Should I claim my space right here and now, or should I let the silence work its magic? The thought of silence was more powerful than I had ever imagined. It was my shield, my weapon. I had spent years fighting for their approval, and it had never come. Maybe now it was time to stop waiting for them to give me what I needed. Maybe it was time to stop being the person they wanted me to be and embrace the person I had become. I wasn't just Amy, the failure, the disappointment. I was Amy, the one who had built something from nothing. And as I sat there, alone with my thoughts, I realized that the real battle wasn't about winning their approval anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about proving to myself that I could be strong without needing anyone's validation. The restaurant was still buzzing around me. The the sound of clinking glasses and murmured conversations filling the space. But in my mind, everything was quiet. It was as if the noise had drowned out, leaving only me and my thoughts. And then, like a flash, I was pulled back to the past. I remembered a time, 10 years ago, when I made the hardest decision of my life. It was a cold winter evening, and I had just stepped out of the family business. My father's words had haunted me for years. No daughter of mine is going to be a glorified waitress. He had said it with such certainty, as if he knew my future, as if I had no right to dream outside of the family's shadow. But that was the turning point. I was tired of being the good daughter, the one who followed all the rules, the one who did everything right, but was never enough. That night, I made the choice to leave. I enrolled in a hospitality management program, despite my father's objections. I had no idea where it would take me, but I knew I had to go. I could still feel the sting of that moment, the feeling of betrayal, the weight of leaving behind everything I had known. But now, as I sat in the very place I had built, it all felt worth it. I had sacrificed so much, but those sacrifices had led me here, and the family still didn't understand. They saw me as the one who had given up, the one who failed. But they didn't know the truth. They didn't know how hard I had worked to get here. And they never would. I returned to the present, shaking off the memory of that time. The past was in the past, and I couldn't keep letting it dictate who I was today. I stood up, walking back to the table where my family still sat. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating, and yet I felt an unfamiliar calm wash over me. As I sat back down, I took a long look at them, at my mother, who still saw me as the child who didn't measure up, and Rose, who could never let go of the rivalry we'd shared since childhood. They looked at me with a mix of confusion and disbelief, but I didn't need to explain myself to them anymore. They had their judgments, and I had my success. I didn't need their validation to feel good about who I had become. The evening wore on, and I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't let it bother me. Instead, I focused on the conversations around me, on the people who had come to know me for who I was. Then Rose, unable to resist, launched her attack. She leaned across the table, her voice dripping with thinly veiled criticism. "So, Amy, how's the hotel business going? You still managing it all on your own?" I could hear the condescension in her tone, but I wasn't going to engage in her games. Instead, I responded calmly, my voice steady. "Yes, it's going well. It's a lot of hard work, but I'm proud of what I've built. I'm doing just fine, thank you." Her face tightened, but she didn't say anything more. It was a small victory, one I didn't need to boast about. Just letting her words slide off me was enough. And yet, as I sat there, I couldn't help but feel a small pang of regret. The success I had achieved felt hollow without the approval of the people who had always mattered most to me, but I knew now that I couldn't keep waiting for them to see me as worthy. I had already proven it to myself. As the evening continued, I could feel the shift in the room. My family, though they didn't want to admit it, was starting to see me differently. They were starting to recognize my achievements, if only in small, quiet ways. But even as that small victory settled in, I knew there was still so much left to prove. This dinner, this moment, it wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. I could feel my resolve hardening with each passing minute. I didn't need to shout or demand anything from them. I didn't need to force them to see me for who I was. My success, my achievements, they spoke for themselves. And the truth was, as I sat there in that room, I realized that the real battle was just beginning. The family may never see me for who I truly was, but I no longer cared. As the laughter continued around me, I couldn't shake the thought, they may never see me for who I truly am, but I don't need them to anymore. I've already won. The Grand Azure's VIP lounge was quiet that morning, its elegant decor casting long shadows under the soft glow of the chandelier. The night before had been a whirlwind. My family's stunned silence as I revealed my true identity, the weight of it still lingering in the air. I had spent the night reflecting, the quiet of the morning giving me space to think. I knew what had to be done. The confrontation was inevitable. I felt calm, more centered than I'd ever been. There was a sense of clarity in my mind, a strength I hadn't known I possessed until now. For years, I had quietly played the part of the family's disappointment, but now I was in control. Now, it was my turn to decide when the time was right to show them just how much I had achieved without their support. I wasn't backing down anymore. Still, there was a lingering fear that gnawed at me. What if, despite everything, my family couldn't accept me for who I had become? What if they continued to see me as the one who had abandoned them? The thought of losing them entirely made my stomach churn, but I couldn't keep holding on to the past. I had to move forward, no matter the cost. The moment I had been avoiding was coming. It was time for the first move. As I walked through the lobby, I didn't expect to run into Rose, but there she was, standing near the elevator with that smug expression I had come to know all too well. The last few hours had done nothing to ease the tension between us. She smiled at me, her tone dripping with mockery. "You know, Amy, some people might find your presence here a bit upsetting," she said, as if she had the power to dictate who belonged in this space. I didn't flinch. Instead, I met her eyes, cool and unbothered. "I'm sure they'll be fine," I replied, my voice calm and steady. Her smile faltered for a moment. She hadn't expected me to respond so easily, so confidently. She was used to seeing me flustered, defensive, but not today. Today, I stood firm. Rose's expression shifted from mockery to something else, uncertainty. For the first time, she wasn't sure of herself in front of me. I could feel it, the crack in her armor. And that felt good. It felt like the first real sign that things were changing. As I walked past her, my mind drifted back to a memory that had never truly left me. The moment my father rejected me. It was 10 years ago, but it felt as if it had just happened. The house was cold that day, the kind of cold that seeped into your bones. My father had called me into his office, his face twisted in anger, his voice sharp as he told me I was no longer welcome in the family business. "No daughter of mine will ever succeed outside of my shadow," he had said, his words cutting through me like a knife. I hadn't known then what I would do next, but I had made my decision. I walked out of that office, and I never looked back. I enrolled in hospitality management, even though my father saw it as a failure. But I was determined. I wasn't going to live in his shadow. I was going to build something on my own. And now, here I was, the owner of the very hotel that had once been his legacy. I snapped back to the present as I entered the dining room, the familiar faces of my family staring back at me. The air was thick with tension. They hadn't expected me to show up for breakfast, and I could feel their eyes on me as I took my seat. My mother's expression was unreadable, her lips pressed into a thin line, while Rose's gaze remained sharp, calculating. I could feel the weight of their judgment, the years of dismissal and misunderstanding. They still saw me as the outsider, the one who had given up on the family business. But now, I didn't care. I wasn't here to fight. I wasn't here to argue. I was here to let my success speak for itself. A family friend, a well-meaning man who didn't know the full story, asked me about my new restaurant venture. I took a deep breath, knowing this was the moment. I casually mentioned that I didn't just have a restaurant, I owned a global hotel empire. I let the words sit in the air, watching as their eyes widened in disbelief. For a moment, the room was silent, and that silence spoke louder than any words could. But it wasn't enough. The quiet realization that had settled over them was fleeting. It was time for me to push further. "I own the Grand Azure chain," I said, my voice steady and clear. "I've built this, and I didn't need your approval to do it." The room froze. My mother's eyes widened, and Rose's mouth hung open. They were speechless, and I reveled in it. I watched them try to process the truth, their faces contorting as they grappled with the reality of who I had become. But I wasn't done. I didn't need to defend myself. I didn't need to prove anything to them anymore. I had already done the impossible, and now it was time for them to accept it. The dinner carried on, but the shift was palpable. Their questions started to change. They no longer questioned my methods or my worth. Instead, they asked me about my business, about my success, the expansion, the partnerships. And as they spoke to me, I noticed something I hadn't before, There was respect in their tone. It was grudging, yes, but it was there. As the evening drew to a close, I could feel the weight of their change, but I knew this wasn't over. The battle had only just begun. I stood to leave, my back straight, my head held high. I had taken my seat at this table, and now it was time to watch them squirm. The morning after the dinner confrontation, the weight of the previous night hung heavily in the air. I woke up early, unable to sleep much, the events replaying in my mind. My family's shocked expressions, the questions they had for me, the realization that they had underestimated me for so long. It was all too much to process in one sitting. But I knew what had to be done. This wasn't over. In fact, the real battle was only just beginning. Sitting in my private office in the Grand Azure, I took in the view of the city skyline, the quiet hum of the morning contrasting with the storm raging inside me. I had a decision to make. I had laid down the gauntlet the night before, and now I had to deal with the consequences. I had shown them a glimpse of my power, but now it was time to confront them head-on. Despite my growing confidence, a part of me feared what would come next. I wasn't sure if I could ever truly earn their respect. What if I pushed them too far, and they turned their backs on me for good? I could feel the weight of those doubts pressing on my chest, but no matter how much it hurt, I couldn't go back. Today was going to be the defining moment, the moment when I either took control of my future or lost everything I had worked so hard to achieve. My thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of a mysterious letter. It had been delivered to my office, addressed in familiar handwriting. It was from my father. I stared at the envelope for a moment, uncertainty creeping in. I opened it slowly and read the words. "Meet me at the estate. We need to talk." I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew it was going to be intense. The letter wasn't apologetic, but it wasn't an outright challenge either. It was neutral, almost too neutral. It made my stomach turn. I sat back in my chair, the weight of the decision hitting me. Should I go? Should I face him again after all these years? There was still so much bitterness between us. But deep down, I knew that this was the moment I had been waiting for. I wasn't sure what I'd find when I arrived, but I knew it was time to end this chapter of my life once and for all. With a heavy sigh, I stood up, folded the letter, and placed it on my desk. I had made my decision. I would go. The family estate felt like a ghost of the past when I arrived. The sprawling mansion, its grand architecture a constant reminder of the legacy I had left behind. I could feel the weight of my father's expectations bearing down on me, even before I stepped through the front door. As I entered the house, the air was thick with unspoken words, with all the history and bitterness between us. Every inch of this house, every room, held memories of the years I had spent under my father's thumb. The walls seemed to whisper his disapproval. When I reached the grand hall, I was greeted by my mother. She stood there, arms crossed, her expression colder than usual. There was no warmth, no welcome. She gave me a silent look, as if I was still the disappointment who had walked away from everything. I could feel the sting of her rejection, but it didn't hurt as much as it used to. Over the years, I had learned to ignore their judgments. I wasn't the same person who had walked out of here years ago. I kept my chin high as I walked past her, the tension hanging in the air like a thick fog. I had no intention of backing down now. I found my father sitting in his study, waiting for me. The room was dimly lit, the heavy furniture and dark wood panels making it feel even more imposing. He looked up as I entered, his face unreadable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was suffocating. Finally, he broke the silence. "Congratulations on your success," he said, his voice cold. "But don't think for a second that I approve of how you did it." I didn't react to his words. I had learned over the years that he always had to have the last word, but that didn't mean he was right. I sat down across from him, my back straight, my gaze unwavering. "You don't need to approve of me, Father," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I built this on my own. I didn't need your approval then, and I don't need it now." For a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Regret? Pride? It was hard to say, but it was fleeting. "You always had the potential," he admitted, his voice softer now, almost reluctant. "But my pride, it wouldn't let me see it. I never thought you could do it without my blessing." His words hung in the air, heavy with years of unspoken tension, but they didn't have the power they once did. I had already proven everything I needed to prove. "I don't need your blessing, Father," I said again. "I've made my own way." That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table, the atmosphere thick with tension. My father, though silent, was still in the room, his presence looming over everything. My mother and Rose continued to look at me with disdain, as if they still didn't understand what had happened. Throughout dinner, I could feel their judgment weighing on me. But I wasn't going to let it break me. Not anymore. I talked about my journey, how I had built my empire from the ground up. As I spoke, I could see their discomfort growing. The more I shared, the more they recoiled, unable to reconcile the woman sitting at the table with the version of me they had always known. By the end of the meal, I had had enough. I stood up, my back straight, my voice steady. "I'm done trying to win your approval," I said, my eyes locking with each of them. "I've built this, and I didn't need any of you to do it." The room was silent, every face frozen in shock. For a moment, no one said a word. I took a deep breath, letting the weight of my words sink in. I had said everything I needed to say. I turned to leave the room, my heart pounding, but my steps confident. As I reached the door, my father's voice stopped me. "You've made your choice," he said, his tone low. "And now I have to make mine." I didn't turn around. I knew what that meant. The battle for my future wasn't over. It had only just begun. I left the mansion, my back straight, my head held high. The storm was coming, but I was ready. The morning after the storm of the family dinner, I woke up with the weight of it all pressing on me. The silence between us had felt suffocating, but what followed had left me unsettled. My mind ran through the conversation with my father, his words lingering like a bitter taste. I had stood my ground, but as I sat in my penthouse, overlooking the city, the gravity of the situation began to sink in. I was proud of myself for finally taking control, but the reality of the aftermath left me uncertain. My family was not ready for this. They still saw me as a failure, a disappointment, despite the empire I had built. My father's distant, congratulatory words haunted me. Had I truly earned his respect? Or had I simply pushed him away forever? The phone call that came next didn't make the situation any clearer. It was from my father's lawyer. He wasted no time in getting to the point. "Your father has decided to take legal action regarding some of the assets you've acquired over the years. He's seeking to reclaim what he believes is rightfully his." The words struck me like a slap to the face. After everything I had worked for, this was his response? A legal battle? I knew that what I had done, building something for myself without his permission, was never going to be accepted. But this felt like a direct attack. I paused, the phone pressed to my ear. My father was forcing my hand, pushing me further into a corner. It was one thing to challenge me emotionally, but now he was playing dirty. I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. "I'll take care of it," I said firmly. "Thank you for informing me." As the line went dead, I set the phone down, my mind racing. The battle was no longer just personal. It was about everything I had worked for, everything I had built. I couldn't back down. I wouldn't. By mid-morning, I found myself in the lawyer's office, the air thick with tension. I had always been able to make calculated decisions, but today felt different. This wasn't just a business deal. This was my father trying to destroy everything I had worked for, using the family's wealth and influence to do it. The lawyer's briefing was as cold and clinical as I expected. "Your father is claiming rights to the assets you've invested in. He believes the family fortune belongs to him by legacy. There is also a clause in the family trust that could invalidate your ownership if it can be proven that you acted against the family's interests." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My father had always made it clear that nothing in our family was ever truly mine, but hearing it in legal terms made it feel too real, too close to the truth. I tried to keep my face neutral, but inside, anger boiled up. I had worked tirelessly to escape his shadow, to build my own future without him, and now he was using the law to take it all back. "How soon do we have to act?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. We need to move quickly, the lawyer said, leaning forward. This could escalate rapidly. If we don't counteract soon, we might lose control of the assets. I nodded, my thoughts already spinning with plans of retaliation. There was no turning back now. This fight wasn't just for respect. It was for my freedom. Back at the Grand Azure Hotel, I gathered my team. I was no longer just a daughter looking for approval. I was a businesswoman, fighting to keep everything I had built. Papers were spread out across my desk, the weight of the situation settling deeper with every passing minute. But then I learned something that shook me to my core. Rose, my own sister, had been feeding information to our father. She had betrayed me. The sense of betrayal stung more than I could have imagined. She was the one person I thought I could trust, the person who had always stood by me. At least, that's what I had believed. I felt the rage building, but I had to focus. I couldn't let her actions distract me from what was at stake. My resolve was harder than ever. I couldn't let her, or anyone, stop me now. Later that afternoon, I met Rose in a small cafe. I needed answers, and I was ready to hear the truth. As she sat across from me, I could see the conflict in her eyes. The guilt was written all over her face. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you side with him, after everything?" Rose hesitated before responding. "You don't understand, Amy. I've always been in your shadow. You're so successful, and I've always felt overlooked. I'm trying to protect the family." I could feel my heart sink. "Protect the family?" I repeated incredulously. "This is about your own jealousy, Rose. You're doing this for him, not for them." She shifted uncomfortably, then added, "He promised me a significant share of the estate if I helped him. What choice did I have?" Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. The betrayal wasn't just from my father, it was from my own sister. I had never imagined she would become a pawn in his game. The sting of it all, the realization that she had always been so willing to play her part, made my stomach churn. I stood up, shaking with anger. "You've made your choice, Rose, but I won't stand by while you destroy what I've worked so hard to build." As the evening fell, I stood in my penthouse, staring out at the city. The weight of everything was pressing down on me. The road ahead was uncertain, and I could feel the storm of emotions swirling inside me. I had come to a crossroads. My family had pushed me to the edge, and now it was time to decide. Did I retreat and make amends, accepting their control over my life, or did I fight for my independence, even if it meant losing them forever? As I stood there, contemplating, the phone rang. I knew who it was before I even answered. It was my mother. She told me that my father was willing to make a deal. He was offering a compromise, but I knew it wasn't a real offer. It was just another trap to weaken my position. "I'm done making deals," I said, my voice steady with resolve. "I've already made my decision." I hung up the phone, the silence that followed almost deafening. Late that night, I was alone in my office, reviewing the legal documents. The phone buzzed, and I saw a package from my father. Inside, there was a copy of the family trust, but something was off. I scanned through it, and there it was. My name wasn't included. It was as if I had never been a part of the family's business to begin with. It wasn't just a missing signature. It looked like my signature had been forged. I felt a cold wave of realization wash over me. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about something far more sinister. I clenched my fists. I couldn't trust anyone, not even my father's lawyer. I needed to dig deeper. "This isn't just a fight for power anymore," I muttered under my breath. "It's a fight for the truth, and I'm ready to uncover it all." The city lights outside my penthouse shimmered like a million scattered thoughts, each one pulling me in a different direction. I sat by the large window, my phone in hand, scrolling through messages and emails from my legal team. The weight of it all was beginning to settle on my shoulders. Family betrayal, legal battles, and the public eye now fixed on me. Everything felt like a storm was closing in. As the night deepened, my mind wandered to moments of my past, childhood memories that still burned in my mind. A birthday where I expected praise for my achievements, only to receive cold silence. A moment where I had worked harder than anyone to get that recognition, but it never came. Those memories still fueled the fire inside me. They reminded me of how far I had come and how much I had to prove, not just to my family, but to myself. I felt restless, anger simmering just beneath the surface. The battle I had started was far from over, and I knew the hardest decisions were still ahead of me. I wasn't just fighting for the family's approval anymore. I was fighting to protect everything I had worked for. And then came the message that sent a shiver through my spine. Rose had filed a counterclaim, asserting that my early investment in the Grand Azure Hotel was made possible by family funds, money that she claimed she or our father had provided. I stared at the words on the screen, disbelief seizing me. This was a direct contradiction of everything I had built. My own sister was now questioning my right to the hotel I had fought for, trying to tear down my legacy. I leaned back, a cold knot forming in my stomach. This was more than a legal threat. This was a betrayal from the one person I thought I could count on. The next day, I called Rose to meet privately. I needed answers. My heart was heavy with the weight of what I had just discovered, but I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. I needed her to admit what she had done. We met at a private meeting room in the Grand Azure, a neutral space where we wouldn't be disturbed. The air between us felt thick with tension. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Why?" I asked, my voice low. "Why did you side with him? Why betray me like this?" Rose hesitated, her lips trembling. "I felt overshadowed, Amy. All this time I was just in your shadow. You were always the successful one, the one Dad always praised, and I was left with nothing but his expectations." I didn't flinch at her words. "So you think I needed to diminish myself? You think I should have just given up? You want me to shrink so you can feel better about yourself?" Her voice cracked as she continued. "I never asked for this, Amy. I thought I could finally have something that was mine. Something Dad could give me, but all I've ever been to him is a disappointment. This was my chance." I slammed my palm on the table, feeling the heat rise in me. "You could have had your own success. Instead, you chose to play this game. With him, with me. And now you've dragged me into it." Rose's face hardened. "He promised me a share of the family estate if I helped him. I had no choice, Amy. You don't understand. I didn't want to lose everything either." The words hit harder than I expected. My own sister, the one I thought would have my back, was nothing more than a pawn in our father's game. My anger flared, but I bit my tongue. This wasn't the moment to lash out. "Then you should have thought about that before," I replied, standing up from the table. "I won't play this game with you, Rose. You're on your own now." As I walked out of the meeting room, the weight of everything pressing down on me, the air seemed thicker than before. My fight had just become personal. And now, it wasn't just about the family business. It was about the world watching me unravel. Outside the hotel, a group of reporters had gathered, their cameras pointed at me as I exited the building. The story about the family feud had leaked. The rumors were spreading faster than I could control them. The weight of the public's gaze pressed on my chest as the media swarmed around, shouting questions I wasn't ready to answer. I tried to keep my head high, but the growing sense of vulnerability was overwhelming. I could feel the pressure mounting, and my reputation was now at stake. The public would see me as a pawn, a spoiled heiress caught up in a family dispute. I couldn't afford to let that narrative stick. I immediately called my PR advisor. "We need to put out a statement," I said, voice steady. "But I need to be strategic about this. Let the silence speak for now." But when we move fast. Later that evening, I found myself sitting at the Grand Azure's boardroom, surrounded by papers and people who seemed to care about everything but what I cared about. They presented me with a compromise deal, reduce my ownership in exchange for my family dropping their claims. It was tempting, I won't lie. The legal battle could be over. The family tension could dissolve. I could have peace. But then I remembered what my mentors had told me. Don't settle when you know you're right. I felt my resolve harden. I couldn't be bought. Not like this. I was right. I had worked for this. And no amount of pressure from anyone was going to make me give it up. Late that night, after the boardroom meeting, I found myself alone in my personal file room, going through the financial records when something caught my eye. A forged signature. On a document I had never seen before. I reviewed it again, feeling my stomach drop. It was a document that would have transferred property rights to my father, one I had never signed. Someone within my team or my family had played a hand in this fraud. I wasn't sure who it was yet, but I knew one thing. This was the final straw. By midnight, I sat at my desk, my fingers shaking slightly as I drafted my response, a formal legal motion to expose the forgery. I reached out to trusted allies, the ones who had always been there for me, to notify them of the truth. I wasn't going to sit back anymore. This wasn't just about power, it was about truth, and I was going to fight for it, no matter what it cost me. I pressed send, and just as I leaned back in my chair, there was a ping. A message from an unknown number. It was encrypted. Someone had evidence that could destroy my case, a secret from my past that I thought was buried. I froze. This isn't just a fight for power anymore, I whispered to myself. It's a fight for the truth. And I'm ready to uncover it all. The first light of dawn streamed through the large windows of my penthouse, casting long shadows across the floor. I sat at my desk, surrounded by legal papers, scanning through the motion I was about to file. It felt surreal. A public showdown was inevitable now. My entire future, everything I had built, was hanging on the outcome of what was about to happen. The weight of it all pressed heavily on me. I had spent the night thinking through my next steps, running over every scenario in my mind. Every move I made, every word I said, would either bring me closer to victory or drag me deeper into the mess my family had created. The silence of the morning felt oppressive. I could hear the echoes of my mother's words from years ago, as if they were still ringing in my ears. Don't make waves, just stay quiet. How many times had she told me that? How many times had I stayed silent, hoping things would just go away? I was done with that. I had fought too long to be seen as less than I was. I had no intention of letting anyone, especially my family, drag me back into the shadows. The sound of my phone buzzing on the desk jolted me from my thoughts. It was my lawyer. I took a deep breath before answering. Amy, the opposing party just filed a lawsuit, he said, his tone grim. They're trying to block the evidence you plan to release. This could set us back even further. I closed my eyes, feeling a surge of anger rise up in my chest. Every time I thought I had reached the breaking point, something new came up. But I wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever. By mid-morning, I was standing in the living room of my childhood home, facing my father. It felt like stepping into a time machine, back to the days when I was nothing more than a disappointment in his eyes. He sat there, hands clasped in front of him, as if the years of tension between us didn't matter. Amy, I don't know what you're trying to prove here, he said, trying to deflect. The legal system is complicated. Family dynamics are complicated. This is not as simple as you think. I stared at him, searching his face for something, anything, to make me believe he still cared, that he didn't despise me. But the truth was clear. He admitted it. You've always been a disappointment. You were never going to be the son I needed. You're always so eager to do things your way, never thinking about what's best for the family. Those words hit harder than I expected. They cut through me like a knife. He had never seen me as anything more than a tool for his success, a reflection of his own image. As I fought to keep my emotions in check, something caught my eye. A letter tucked away on his desk. I pulled it out, and as I read the words, my stomach dropped. It was from his lawyer, referencing a hidden will, one that could change everything. A will that might strip me of everything I had fought for. Back in my office, my mind raced. The pieces were falling into place. I had the evidence I needed to expose the fraud. My legal team was working around the clock, piecing together the timeline, securing witness testimonies from employees who had once worked for my father. I wasn't going to sit back and let them dictate my fate. This was my company. This was my life. I would fight for it. As I was going through the documents, one of my board members called. His voice was laced with urgency. Amy, the rival family knows about your plan. They're already preparing a countermeasure. It's going to be a fight, but you're not alone in this. The pressure mounted. I knew what I had to do, but now the stakes had just gotten higher. That evening, I met Rose. We sat in a dimly lit room in the family estate. She looked at me, eyes filled with desperation, as she spoke. "I never meant for things to go this far, Amy," she said, her voice trembling. "I was just so tired of being overlooked. I wanted to be part of something too. I thought if I sided with Dad, I'd finally have a place in this family." My heart twisted at her words. She was my sister, but I couldn't let her excuses blind me any longer. She had made her choice. She had chosen to betray me. "You didn't just betray me, Rose. You betrayed everything I've worked for. I did this on my own. I didn't need him. I didn't need any of you." Rose's voice cracked. "I didn't know what else to do. You've always been the one everyone looked up to, and I was just invisible. I thought I could change that." The bitterness I had felt earlier turned into something darker, something I couldn't name. But it was too late for apologies now. "Rose," I said, my voice hard, "I don't need your forgiveness, but you need to understand something. You're not getting away with this." The media storm was already brewing. After the meeting with Rose, a local reporter had caught wind of the family feud. The story broke quickly, spreading across the news. The pressure mounted on me. The media was painting a picture of a woman caught in a power struggle, and they were eating it up. I had no choice but to take control of the narrative. At a grand press conference later that day, I stood in front of the cameras, ready to expose everything. The falsified documents, the manipulation, the lies. I couldn't be silent any longer. The media reacted with shock, awe, and a frenzy of questions. The story went viral almost immediately, and for a moment, I felt the weight of every decision I'd ever made. But just as I was about to leave the conference, a surprise video was released. It showed my father, his face twisted in anger, shouting at someone off camera. It was unflattering, and it was a blow to the family's credibility. I hadn't authorized it, but someone had. Who? Later that night, as I prepared for the final showdown, I reflected on everything that had led to this moment. I had fought for so long. But was I ready for what would come next? I reached out to one of my mentors, who gave me the advice I needed to hear. Sometimes you have to burn the bridges to build a new one. The final decision would be made tomorrow. I had made my peace with what was about to happen, but the weight of the consequences still hung heavy in the air. Just as I was about to leave for court, an anonymous letter arrived. It pleaded with me to reconsider. It warned of consequences I couldn't foresee, how my actions would hurt people I hadn't even thought of. I stared at the letter, torn between the truth and the cost of exposing it. But there was no going back now. The next morning, I entered the courtroom, the air thick with tension. The judge called for a short recess, and my lawyer leaned in, his face pale. "Someone's threatening your case," he said, holding up his phone. My heart dropped. The battle was far from over, and I wasn't sure how far I could go before everything came crashing down. As I stood there, waiting for the gavel to fall, I knew this was only the beginning. The courtroom buzzed with tension as I stood outside, waiting for the final session to begin. The air felt thick, heavy, as if it had been charged with every ounce of the emotional weight I had been carrying for months. Today was it. The day that would decide everything. The truth was about to come out. Finally, the long, drawn-out battle would be over. I stood in front of the doors, taking a deep breath as my lawyer briefed me one last time. He was trying to offer me comfort, reminding me that I was ready. "You've done the hard part," he said quietly. "Now it's time to finish it." I nodded, but even his words couldn't calm the storm inside me. I could feel my nerves crawling under my skin, the anxiety of what lay ahead. The press was already gathered in the hallway, their cameras ready. My heart skipped a beat as the thought hit me. This was no longer just about family. This was public now, a spectacle for the world to watch. No matter how it ended, my life would be marked by this moment. Then, just before the session was set to begin, I received a message, a cryptic one. "They know about the will. You need to be careful." I paused, my mind racing. What will? What wasn't I being told? Who was it from? And why now, of all times? My hands tightened around the phone as the weight of the new revelation hit me. There were still secrets I hadn't uncovered. My fight wasn't over yet. Inside the courtroom, the judge entered and the room fell silent. He glanced over the papers in front of him, and I could see the tension in his posture. My stomach tightened as he began reading the verdict aloud, his voice echoing in the quiet room. The damages for the fraudulent activities were first announced, and I felt a sense of relief. I was going to win this. But then, the judge paused, looking up from the documents. He turned to face us, his gaze steady. And as for the family estate, my breath caught in my throat. I'm ruling in favor of Miss Amy, as she has proven rightful ownership. I could feel the shift in the room. A collective exhale. The relief was almost overwhelming. But just as the words settled in, the courtroom door slammed open, and Rose's lawyer stood up. "A motion has been filed," he said, his voice booming. "We request that the execution of the judgment be delayed until further evidence can be reviewed. This is not a straightforward ruling." The shock in the room was palpable. My heart dropped as I turned to look at Rose, sitting quietly, her face unreadable. She had done it again. Just when I thought the victory was mine, she had found a way to stall. The courtroom cleared out, and the tension followed me into the private meeting room where my father was waiting. He stood by the window, his back turned to me. I felt my pulse quicken. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. I walked in, closing the door behind me, and turned to face him. "We've talked enough," I replied, the years of resentment and betrayal making my voice steady. "But I'm not going to let you manipulate me anymore," he scoffed, turning slowly to look at me. "You think this is over, don't you? You think that just because you've won a legal battle, you've won everything. But there's more you don't know. More I didn't tell you." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean like how you kept me in the dark about the family trust? Or how you tried to control everything I did?" He clenched his jaw, but didn't speak. I pressed on. "You knew about Mom's role in all of this, didn't you?" I said, my voice now cold. "You knew she had a hand in making sure I failed at every turn, but you never said a word because it suited your needs." He looked away, his expression hard. "It was never about you. It was about control." "You couldn't see it, but it's always been about control." The truth hit me harder than I expected, but I wasn't going to let him win. Not now, not ever again. That evening, I sat at my desk, reviewing the final details of the estate. The paperwork was almost done. The final signatures were all that was needed to officially claim what was mine. I thought about how far I'd come, from being overlooked and dismissed by my family to now, owning everything they tried to take from me. The phone rang, pulling me from my thoughts. It was one of my father's old associates. His voice was tight, urgent. "Amy, take what you deserve. Don't let anyone stand in your way." I hung up the phone and stared out the window for a moment. Everything had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The power I had once let slip through my fingers was now firmly in my grasp. But as I gathered the documents to finalize my control over the business, there was a knock on the door. A package. I opened it carefully, and inside, I found a box of letters. The handwriting on the top caught my attention. It was from my mother. The contents revealed something I hadn't expected. Hidden in those letters were documents that exposed how my inheritance had been manipulated, how my family had worked to keep me down, even when they pretended to support me. The sting of betrayal hit me again, but this time, I had the power. I could use this information to solidify my position even further. Later that night, I stood in my penthouse, the weight of everything settling over me as I prepared for the final confrontation with Rose. The anger and hurt I had carried for years simmered beneath the surface. She knocked on my door just as I expected. This time there was no pretense, no facade. "I need you to understand," Rose said, her voice shaky. "I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted the recognition I've always been denied." I crossed my arms. "You hurt me because you were too afraid to stand on your own, and you wanted to keep me in your shadow." She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never knew how to be enough." I stared at her for a long time, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her anymore. The damage was done, and there was no going back. The next day, the final ruling was made. I stood outside the courthouse, the press gathered around me. As I gave my statement, a sense of peace washed over me. The journey was finally over. But as I turned to leave, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message. This may not be the end, but only the beginning. I stopped in my tracks. The weight of the words settled over me like a heavy cloud. Had I truly won? Or was there more I had yet to uncover? I stood by my window that night, watching the city lights twinkle below. The future stretched out before me, full of endless possibilities. But in the back of my mind, that message echoed. What had I missed? The journey was far from over.